Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Tell me your experiences with ghosts. The Ghost of Grozny. It was a cold winter night in Grozny, Chechnya. A group of 10 Russian soldiers were patrolling the area, looking for any suspicious activity by Chechen rebels. The tension was palpable in the air, since they knew that at any moment they could be attacked. As they walked, one of the soldiers noticed something strange in the dark. A dark figure seemed to move among the ruined buildings. He alerted his companions, and together they cautiously advanced toward the figure. When they were close enough, they realized that it was a headless figure. His body was covered in scars and seemed to float in the air. The terrified soldiers trained their weapons on the figure, but no shot seemed to have any effect on it. The headless figure began to move towards the soldiers, and they backed away in fright. Suddenly, the figure disappeared into the darkness, leaving the soldiers unaware of what had happened. From that moment on, the soldiers began to report a series of paranormal events in the area. They often heard laughter and wailing coming from the ruined buildings, and felt they were being watched by an invisible presence. The soldiers tried to find a rational explanation, but found none. Some believed the headless figure was a spirit that had been summoned by Chechen rebels to attack Russian soldiers. In time, the soldiers left the area, and the mystery of the headless figure remained unsolved. But some of them still remember that night as one of the most terrifying experiences of their lives, and believe that something supernatural dwells in the ruins of Grozny.
I have been followed by death my entire life. I had a Santeria woman tell me I am destined to be some word I can't remember, but it involved my grandfather dying before my father reached puberty, and my father's firstborn dying in infancy before I was born, and my complicated few first months clinging to life. I am only 25 from a very small town, but I've been to more funerals than I remember. I've had 7 people, including a girlfriend and several best friends, die in my presence or around me. The past few months I have been going to therapy for anger issues and am remembering horrible things about my childhood in which I confronted my father about. I grew up in a haunted house and experiences have been coming back to me in waves. Lots of memories, talking to a dead aunt and an old man whispering in my bedroom window. That would be impossible on a second floor. Worst was something my parents actually joked about for years because of an entity I will post about in my next post. I spent 12 to 24 being a militant atheist and have recently become spiritual and suspect this is why I am remembering this. This one has been the strangest recollection because my parents have mentioned it for years and bullied me for it. I used to cry and scream about Kiss being in my room, because it was the only point of reference my 6-year-old brain had to describe the 8-foot-tall, pale-skinned man with bat wings over his eyes, standing in the corner of my bedroom. I vividly remember one day playing outside when I was maybe 10 while my father washed his car, and I went inside to get more action figures, and in broad daylight with the sun blaring through all the windows, I saw the bat-faced man clear as day in my bedroom. I ran out and told my father, and he very seriously told me to go back into the house and ask him to leave, which I recently confronted him for. When I went back in, the man was standing in the same place, and when I asked him to leave, he started approaching me, and I screamed and wailed and grabbed a toy sword, and my father rushed in and carried me out of the house. For years, my parents bullied me whenever Gene Simmons was on TV or anything Kiss-related, and bought a cardboard cutout of him to put into the basement of a house we moved to in high school. I always chalked this up to an over-imaginative kid being paranoid, but I now remember seeing this man several times and him yelling at my dead aunt. I understand not believing your kid telling you a ghost story, but your kid tells you there is a man in the house or whatever I said. Even if I said Kiss is in my bedroom, and none of this alerting any kind of fatherly instinct always bugged me. Then him giving me what I now know is fairly common advice for dealing with ghosts is really odd. We were drinking while watching the game last week, and I asked him about this specific instance, and that's when he told me lots of things I'm still reeling from. He has also seen the monster and had read lots about the occult and could hold a conversation with me about all kinds of /x/schizo shit. My dad is 55 and has never spent a day on the internet. He has been an entirely normal blue-collar guy my entire life and spends his weekends fixing things up and listening to the radio. I've never seen him read a book. It really freaked me out as we discussed the encounters I had as a child, and that he routinely took me to church and had been baptized 3 times, which I have zero recollection of. I have seen very bizarre and feel like private things that I have never spoken about or put to writing until now. When I moved into this apartment, there was an old woman sitting at my dinner table at 3 a.m. when I went to get water downstairs. I did not tell my wife about this or acknowledge the women as I felt I was intruding her space. I took a sip of water and left it for her and never saw her again. There is an old graveyard in my city I have seen unexplainable, but seemingly non-malevolent things at. I have seen orbs and objects my entire life. I feel like I have been marked by something my father did, but I'm too busy with college and work to investigate further or confront him again.
So what was his reason for being so dismissive about it as a child? If he also saw the entity, why would he mock you about it and laugh every time he saw Gene Simmons? If he was fairly knowledgeable about this topic but doesn't use the internet or read books, how did he know them? What are the other things you discussed that still have you reeling?
This is exactly why I'm so confused as to his motivations and reactions. His occult knowledge was just very surprising. I'm guessing he's done research when I said he doesn't read. I've just never seen or understood him to be educated much in any way. My speculation is that he messed with the occult at some point in his life, or knew the entity specifically, and knew it to not be a threat. So while he believed me, he was irritated with my extreme reaction, or knew there was no danger, if that makes sense. Family history is very odd, and all of my grandparents died before I was born, which is odd considering my parents had me in their 30s. I'm reeling from piecing together all of these things after years of being a hardcore denier of stuff like this and blocking out trauma and confusing things. Like I mentioned, my parents have an odd sense of humor and have joked about thinking I was possessed, and now I don't know if that was a joke or a partial truth. There's also things I remember from living in my childhood home, like babysitters always quitting and lots of financial trouble and odd neighbors. But also conflicting memories like friends maintaining a house down the street was haunted, and they never experienced anything at my house.
I guess I asked because I've had experiences as a child that yours reminded me of. The most memorable one when I was maybe 5 was waking up in the middle of the night and seeing an older man in my room staring out the window. He was wearing a zigzag patterned sweater. My father went through some clothing left in the house from the landlord's father, who had died decades prior, and found the exact sweater. I had a little children's book that played music when you pressed different buttons, maybe 5 or 6 songs like Old MacDonald Had a Farm and such. One time in the middle of the night I woke up to the book playing a song I had never heard before. I had action figures of different brands and types that made noise when you pressed a button. In the middle of the day, most if not all of them started to make noise and wouldn't stop, repeating over and over. My parents were around for that, and they had to put them in the guest bathroom we rarely used until their batteries died. I had seen green hands on 2 separate occasions. The first time it was at night. I was sitting on the couch that was in the middle of the living room, not pressed against a wall, and I see a monstrous-looking hand with fairly long black nails and was overall grotesque. The other hand looked fairly normal and was near the doorknob in my bedroom in the middle of the night. My father claimed to have seen this hand too, a different night. I eventually refused to sleep in that room since most of the occurrences happened there. I slept on the pull-out bed in the living room for years. One time in the middle of the night, I heard a car drive into our driveway. I could hear it rolling on the gravel and even the car door open and close. I couldn't see the car and there were no lights and nobody came to the door. There were several other things that happened, but those stick out the most, and the rest are very fuzzy memories as I lived there between 4 and 11 years of age.
Can you describe what the hands were doing?
The grotesque one seemed like it was reaching for me. Only the light of our fireplace was going, and when I turned behind myself to see it, it did not vanish. It reeled back into the darkness. I had vision of the hand for about 2 seconds, so more than a glance. The second hand looked completely different and was completely motionless. I think it was on my dresser that was right next to the doorknob, but it didn't move. If I remember correctly, this hand faded away, still motionless, over a period of maybe 5 or so seconds. The two hands seemed completely different, and the first one that seemed to reach for me felt much more malevolent.
My parents did the same thing to me. They still crack up about the time I almost leapt from the top of a bunk bed to my death, because the witch in my room told me to, or because I was trying to escape her. They changed the details, but apparently I could always see some old hag kicking about the place, and it got so bad that my brother had to share a room with me and take the top bunk for fear I'd jump off. Dad used to scare me whenever I went to tell them about the entities I saw, and I'm horrified that a father would do that to his kid. He said he was trying to make me believe it was bullshit, and I was a wuss, but then confided that he'd once spoken to something that told him it was going to claim one of his kids. He never went into much detail, and is a super atheist kind of guy, but said he dabbled in the occult since it was the fashion in the late 70s. Mom said that even when I was in the womb, I would spaz out any time they went somewhere spooky, and in particular, my grandma's house in Portsmouth. My uncle apparently saw some scary old hag there in his bedroom too, and when he visited us after we moved overseas, told me that it left when we did, and the house went back to normal. The scariest thing for me is that I spent my last night in England in that room. Even my no-nonsense mom said she heard regular footsteps coming from that room when she lived there and was home alone. All in all, I've had plenty of strange shit happen to me, and have somehow developed the ability to induce the fear and the pulsing, vibrating that you get during sleep paralysis, while still being able to move and talk freely. I did it just the other night, and was so terrified I could hardly bear to open my eyes. I decided to sack up and stop being weak, so I asked if there was anything there, and if there was, would it trade some tasty loosh for knowledge or fortune or whatever? I'm still waiting, so figure it's just my brain being weird.
I don't know why I'm even posting this. Anyway, Uncle dies in a motorcycle accident going around a bend in front of church. About a week goes by. My parents and I go grocery shopping at night, come back home and drive through the bend. This weird semi-shapeless blob of a shadow shimmies its way across the road. Looks like the Grim Reaper from Michael J. Fox's The Frighteners movie. Parents' heads whip to the side to look at each other. Please tell me you saw that. Yes. As they're reacting and talking to each other, I'm staring straight ahead from the back seat. See this thing continue to move past the curb and disappear in the woods. Definitely had something to do with my uncle's death. Got back to the neighborhood to take care of my cousin. They lived down the street. And when we shared the story with him, the TV turned on by itself. Weird shit.
My grandparents lived in an old farmhouse they'd rented for like 30 years. I grew up hearing ghost stories all my life about it, and had my own experience there too. Apparently, the farmer that owned it died in it, and didn't like people in there. He obviously wasn't harmful or anything, just fucked with people who were there as best as his ghostly self could. My dad told me a story about how when he was a kid there, he was with a friend playing upstairs, waiting for their brother to get home off the bus. They heard him run up the stairs but never saw him, looked all around. The third time this happened, as they were looking, the bus pulled up and out popped his brother. My step-grandma moved in years after that. She is a very spiritual and Christian woman, and apparently when she first moved in with my grandpa, the ghost went a little nuts. I'm not sure exactly what happened to her, but she managed to tell it that they were there to take care of the house, would keep it safe, etc., and it went pretty quiet. For a time while I was in college, I lived there. All of the friends I've ever brought there could definitely tell there was something else there. The place had a vibe about it. One night I wanted to play some games on the big TV downstairs, so I grabbed my PS3 and started to quietly make my way down. Now both my grandparents were asleep in a room across the hall. I wanted to game and didn't want to be interrupted, so I didn't want to wake them. This was an old farmhouse, and I wasn't yet familiar with where all the floorboard squeaks were, so I went extremely slow. I would take one soft step and wait and listen. Sure enough, every time I heard both of my grandparents' distinct snores, I went through that elaborate description of my creeping around because, as I almost made it to the steps down after doing this for about 10 steps, I heard a voice I didn't recognize from right behind my head whisper, "Goodnight Anon." Needless to say, I immediately tossed my precious PS3 on my bed and booked it out of the house to stay with my GF for the night. My grandma had a priest bless the house once a month after that, and there weren't any other problems.
I have one experience that from time to time I tell here. I was a 7-year-old kid, sleeping with my grandma. I couldn't sleep that night. Grandparents lived in some flat. Sometime late at night, 2 ghosts flew through the doors. For a moment, I thought that the doors were open. I don't remember the other one as it quickly vanished, but one of them was flying around happily and slipped between me and Grandma. Then he looked me in the eyes, and then he realized that I saw him, and his eyes were full of dread and horror. He didn't expect me to see him. It all disappeared, and I had a feeling like it was a dream, except I couldn't sleep that night. It all happened very quickly. As a matter of fact, it takes more time to tell the story than the actual happening. It was weird. I wasn't necessarily scared, maybe slightly, but I felt like WTF. WTF is happening. How can it be real?
Hey /x/, I'm from /sci/, but I have a story that I thought I'd share with you. Nothing shocking, but it's just something I haven't been able to find an explanation for. I'll have to split up the posts. About 6 years ago, I was 17. A guy I knew for a short time before he moved back to Arizona, I'm in Georgia, told me about something odd he saw. Pretty typical cliché scary story, but kinda creepy. He and some friends were out and about one night trying to find some haunted places around Marietta and came across some old building. They were walking around the area seeing if they could get in around the back and were rather shocked when they saw someone standing there. It was a girl, probably teenaged, who, in his memory, reminded him of the girl from The Ring or The Grudge or something similar. She moved toward them in a slow, stumbling manner, and they took off back around to the front and got in their car and left. On the way out, they went over a small hump, and on the other side, standing in the middle of the road, was the girl. He noticed a feature again. One of her arms was fucked up, apparently reminding him of some sort of claw, as if her thumb had been pulled halfway back down her arm and was hanging off, but had healed. Spooky, but I took it for what it was, a ghost story, and forgot about it, even though we had confirmed the story immediately after with others who were there. Fast forward to last year. I haven't talked to or thought about that guy in about 2 or 3 years. A new coworker who had moved to Georgia from Florida, and I had become decent friends. I don't have Facebook, so we talked over Skype a bit, working on side projects and gaming on Steam and stuff. He messages me one night saying he's going to meet up with a girl near the state line. We're about an hour from it. A few hours later, he texts me on his way home. Fucking be home so I can call on Skype in 30 minutes. I get a call and he's white as a ghost. He tells me that on his way home, he was taking the same way he always does and rounds a corner and almost hits someone walking across the street. He said it was a girl, some girl who looked like she had been in a car accident. Ripped clothes, long black hair. Like that one from that Grudge movie. I don't have the chat logs anymore since it was about a year ago, but he said something to the extent of, but the weirdest thing was her arm. She had this fucked up big lobster arm. And he gives an exact description of the girl I had heard about over half a decade prior. He said the girl didn't strike him as paranormal, but she ignored the car almost completely until she reached the other side of the road, at which point she turned her head and looked directly at his car. Not just any spin, but one of those stereotypical horror snap to kind of looks. My friend said, "So I literally shit in my pants and drove home." No kidding either. He actually showed me the stain in the pants he had just thrown away. I got onto my wife's Facebook and searched for the guy who first told me about the girl and sent him a friend's request. When he accepted the next day, we caught up for a second, but I asked if I could call, and of course he let me, so I call, and he's a bit busy with some people. But after a couple formalities, I ask him, "Do you remember that girl thing?" You almost ran over one night when you and EJ went to that haunted place. I distinctly remember his demeanor changing, and he tells me he's stepping outside. He goes, "What the fuck? Why are you bringing that up?" Without telling him about the previous night, I asked him to describe her, since it had been a while and I wanted to make sure my memory wasn't fuzzy. Surely enough, it's spot on. I tell him what happened, and after a sigh, he tells me his hairs are standing on end. Not only had that huge coincidence occurred, but he tells me that not 1 week before he was telling someone that story for the first time in years. You get the point. Weird coincidental shit, but I can't explain it. Neither of these guys know each other exists. Each was perfectly genuine. You probably know what it's like to know when someone is shaken. I had never told the first guy's story anyways, because frankly to me it was just another silly little made-up ghost story. And most of my friends aren't interested in that kind of stuff anyways, including the coworker who saw the girl. These occurrences were also 5 or 5.5 years apart, and in parts of Georgia around an hour away from each other. If it were some homeless person, I doubt they'd go from Marietta, close to Atlanta, so more urban, a few homeless shelters, etc., out to the far side of Carrollton, much more rural, almost non-existent homeless population, just to walk through the woods. Also, according to descriptions, she was in the exact same clothes.
Damn, well, it could be that some of the other people from that night spread the tale and your coworker eventually heard of it. Highly unlikely, but not impossible.
Well, it was just me and him that night. We were walking around a new neighborhood under construction near my old place, and he mentioned that quiet, hot nights reminded him of it.
Putting aside the paranormal for a moment, it could be a girl with a condition like ectrodactyly. That sounds consistent with the descriptions of her deformed arm. The fact that she wears tattered clothing, has long, unkempt hair, and is in random deserted places late at night could mean she's homeless. Maybe it's difficult to get along normally because of discrimination and people's discomfort over her disability. Maybe she has some sort of mental impairment as well that causes her to wander. Either way, it's somewhat odd that two people had such disturbing experiences with her, but the odd feelings could come mostly from the shock of seeing a mostly normal person with a rare deformity. That's my best guess.
I'm very skeptical of ghosts, but I've had 2 very strange experiences a few years back. I think about these sometimes and I still can't come up with any good explanations. First one below, I'll put the second one in a separate post. I had a girlfriend in high school or college for 3.5 years. Me and her used to argue a lot 2 years into the relationship. Live in the middle of the woods. Just me and my ex at the house, had 2 dogs sleeping upstairs. We were in the basement. I was doing the laundry and she was arguing with me about something. In the middle of the argument, one of the doors in the basement slams shut all by itself. The door slams hard. It's a super heavy door, and it's not like there was any wind in the basement. My ex immediately goes silent and runs upstairs. We find dogs still laying on the couch upstairs. I tried to talk to her about how weird it was. She replies with a shaky voice, "I don't want to talk about it." I tried to bring it up to her 2 weeks later. She says that she doesn't remember any of it. Here's my second story. Also happened when I was in a relationship with that same girl, driving home from school one day. I got a call from my ex out of nowhere. She's crying, sounds scared and angry. Anon, who's with you in the car? Nobody. What the fuck? She doesn't believe me. She thinks I'm playing some sort of mean joke on her. I FaceTime her to show I'm in an empty car. She finally believes me that there's nobody in the car with me. She explains that she got a call from my number. She answers it thinking it was me. Some voice she doesn't recognize on the line says something to get her really scared. She hangs up out of fear and decides to call me scared and angry because she thought I was just playing a scary prank on her. After I FaceTimed her and got her to calm down, I tried to ask multiple times what the person on the line said to freak her out so bad. She kept dodging the question and never told me. I tried to ask her about it 2 weeks later, and just like the first story, she said she didn't know what I was talking about. I know that both stories actually happened. They weren't a dream or something, because I told a close friend both stories after they happened, and he remembered me telling him a few weeks later. I'm still friends with the same guy, and we were just talking about these stories the other night.
Sounds more like she was manipulative with BPD. The ghosts did you a solid, you dodged a bullet.
Awesome stuff, Anon. Anyway, you could Greentext the story about seeing the old woman at your dinner table in the middle of the night. Sounds spooky. I've never had anything supernatural happen to me. But routinely, I find that people who have continuous experiences can trace it back to someone in their family, usually a parent, dabbling in the occult.
Occult theory really makes sense to me. I'm terrible at Greentext, but here you go. Move into a luxury apartment after a life of living in slums and shitty houses. Moving in said apartment with a girlfriend who has a wealthy family that has helped me get life together. Mid-size building in a very large city. It used to be a union club building. They have converted into apartments, but it stood abandoned for years and became a haven for homeless and drug activities. Has a pool on the 13th floor. Actually lists the 13th floor on the elevator and everything. Spooky photos from the 40s all around the building to show the before and after of the restoration, including a Shining-esque photo of everyone in the ballroom. All of this said, the restoration and apartment amenities are really nice and I feel very safe in the building. I genuinely trust in my intuition, and I've never gotten a bad feeling about the place despite everything I've listed above. First day in my new apartment, I went to bed late because I was unpacking. Building is the quietest place I've ever lived despite being in a big city. Mattress on floor with girlfriend upstairs. Hear things knocking over just as I'm falling asleep, then hear glass shatter. My gut reaction is that our cat is knocking things over, but when I sit up, I see him sleeping in the bathroom. Go downstairs to investigate. Nothing is out of place. Go back to bed upstairs. Wake up to girlfriend yelling at the cat. Go downstairs and the glass I drank water out of is shattered on the floor, and a bunch of girlfriend's paint tubes are all over the floor. Help her clean up and don't think much of it. Later in the week. The house is set up now, including chairs at the table, bed, etc. Wake up suddenly with the same feeling as before, but don't feel anything. Feel compelled to go downstairs. Turn the corner at the bottom of the staircase, and an old woman is sitting at the table with her back turned to me. Freeze not out of fear, but like I'm seeing something I shouldn't. I can't really explain the feeling. Like hearing a private conversation you shouldn't. She's got messy hair and is wearing a nightgown. I get an uneasy feeling as I start to approach, like I'm going to go around to see her face and she's going to look like the Grudge or something. Calm my nerves and walk around her to the other side of the table. She's staring ahead but glances at me and looks me in the eyes with a polite smile, like one you give a waiter checking on your table. Again, I feel like I'm interrupting. On autopilot and awkwardness, I go to drink a glass of water. She's still staring at the other chairs. I get an overwhelming wave of tiredness. I set down the glass on the table as I try to brace myself and wrench my eyes open and get a look at her. She ignores me, and I don't remember anything else but waking up the next morning. Wake up and rush downstairs. Glass is intact at the table and nothing is out of place. I don't know why, but I felt like she was visiting. I don't know what either of my grandmothers, both died long before I was born, look like, so it's possible it was one of them. One of the oddest interactions, and I haven't had an inkling of an uneasy feeling about this place since.
I imagine some old lady telling her friends that she just saw a young dude's ghost grabbing a glass of water, and nobody believes her, but they can't explain why the water glass is now on the table.
This is what I think of too. I can't help but wonder if mundane hauntings like this are just an accidental fold in time and space.
Be me, little kid, at a sleepover with a friend, chilling in his room in the middle of the night playing PS2. Closet door creaks open, marker flies across the room and hits the wall. We both freak out. I couldn't sleep that night because every time I closed my eyes, I could feel something grabbing my face. Ever since then, I have been terrified of ghosts. Learn from TV that you can banish ghosts. Try to learn how by checking out books at my library, but none of the librarians take me seriously. One of them even suggests my mom take me to church, suggesting there was something wrong with me. Don't care. Go to the bookstore and buy The Lesser Key of Solomon because I saw it in the library catalog under Paranormal. Read. Nothing useful. Check out some books on shamanism, necromancy, and the attempted ritual to summon murmur. Doesn't work. Eventually figure out how to draw a magic circle to banish ghosts. Every time I hear a bump in the house, I whip out the magic circle and say my little chant and boom, no more noise. Started going around to different areas like abandoned houses and banishing ghosts. Get a really nasty geist that follows me home, still hasn't left. Can't banish it, pray to murmur, no help. Seriously, murmur is the most worthless piece of shit. I don't even know why I try. Still here, I'm 25 years old now, stop banishing ghosts. Pretty sure that fucking geist is still haunting me. Probably watches me watch stuff. I'm pretty sure this little shit is the one misplacing my work gloves. Every time I get a side job and I go to get my work gloves, they are gone. Every time. I've gone through 4 pairs in the last year. Fucking asshole.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.